Morning. Hello.
Morning.
Good morning. Good to see you this morning. And with that, Jill, I think we'll kick it off. Thank you for joining us, Senator Cruz, and for joining us today. I'll step through some housekeeping, but it's just great to see everybody. Yes, it is still virtual. We're not in person, but hopefully soon we'll be able to get to a place where we are in person. So thank you, everybody, though, for joining. And Jill's going to go ahead and mute everybody, and that way we don't have any background or disturbances for the meeting today. But I just really appreciate everybody. If you don't mind, what we do with our governmental affairs calls is that, or our meetings, is that we start with a word of prayer. So if you don't mind joining me this morning for a quick word of prayer as we get started. Lord, we thank you for this day. Pray that you please watch over our conversation today. Lord, I pray that you please just give wisdom to those that are advocating on behalf of East Texas and the East Texas business environment. Lord, I pray that you please be with our senators and our congressmen as they join us today, that you would give them wisdom and clarity in the things they say. Lord, we thank you for the blessings that you've given us. We look forward to a great year. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. All right. Well, good morning, everybody. My name is Mark Robinson. I'm External Affairs Manager for Southwestern Electric Power Group, part of the American Electric Power family. And I am the chairperson for the Governmental Affairs Committee for Kilgore Area Chamber of Commerce, as well as on the public policy for the Longview Chamber of Commerce and part of the East Texas Coalition team. East Texas Coalition is bringing this conversation to you today. This is a joint advocacy group that we're super excited about. This is a regional group. I love the fact that I get to say Lindale, Tyler, Longview, and Kilgore all in the same sentence. And we can talk about regional public policy. We can talk about what makes East Texas a better place to live, work, and do business. So I'm excited about that. This meeting today is being recorded by Jill. Jill McCartney is our host today. She's going to be our facilitator. Please look down and find the chat button. Although you will be muted today, I will ask that if you have any questions, that you chat them to Jill. If you're having any functional issues, or you're having any background noise, or experiencing any technical difficulties, please reach out to Jill, and Jill will help you get set up. So this is being recorded. Jill is our facilitator, and I guess we're just going to jump in. I want to thank Senator Cruz. Thank you for allowing us to introduce you. I'm going to go through your bio through his life. Senator Cruz has proven to be a passionate and effective fighter for limited government, economic growth, and the Constitution. Ted's call to public service has been inspired by his firsthand observation of the pursuit of freedom and the opportunity in America. This came from Ted's father, Rafael, who was tortured and imprisoned in Cuba, and then after that fled to the United States of America. Growing up, his father would often say to him, when we faced oppression in Cuba, I had a place to flee to. If we lose our freedom here in America, where do we go? So Ted has been a tireless fighter for liberty because his family knows what it is like to lose it. As Solicitor General for the great state of Texas and in private practice, Senator Cruz has authored more than 80 United States Supreme Court briefs, argued 43 oral arguments, including 9 before the United States Supreme Court. In the United States Senate, Ted has led the fight to defend life, marriage, the First Amendment, the Second Amendment, and the entire Bill of Rights. He currently serves on the Committee on Foreign Relations, Commerce, Science, and Transportation, the Judiciary, Joint Economic Committee, the Committee on Rules Administration, and only about 11 subcommittees on top of that. So I don't know what he does with his spare time, but it sure is great to have you on the call today. Senator Cruz, thank you so much for joining us today.
Well, Mark, thank you for having me. It's great to be with you. I wish I was with y'all in person. I always enjoy being with friends in East Texas, and I got to say, the values of East Texas. I love that y'all begin with a prayer. I love that you love Texas, you love America, you love freedom, and I have long thought that if the state of Texas and if the country could hew more closely to East Texas values, that we would be we would be taking a big step in the right direction. And so it is great to be with you guys. I'm also impressed that you actually got Jason Wright to get dressed today. I didn't know he owned a jacket, so it's nice to see that he can at least. I assume he's in shorts and flip flops off the screen, but we don't know that for sure.
We won't do any checks for sure.
we will avoid a Jeffrey Toobin on this call.
Absolutely.
So listen, these are extraordinary times for our country. We're facing challenges. Last year was as rough a year as this country's had in a long, long time. We faced a global pandemic and we faced an economic crisis simultaneously. And millions of Americans lost their jobs. Millions of small businesses closed down. And where we are now, I think some of that, we're starting to come out of it. We're seeing with COVID, more and more people are getting vaccinated, and the light at the end of the tunnel we're able to see now. I think that is encouraging. Texas, I think, has displayed a lot more common sense than some other parts of the country. And in particular, Texas is open now. We've allowed small businesses to open. Early on in this pandemic, I think government made a lot of bad decisions, shutting businesses down that wreaked utter havoc and disaster on a lot of lives. And I think Texans want to work. We want to provide for our families. We want to provide for our kids. And we want to do so in a way that's safe. I think Texans, we understand this is a disease. It's serious. It needs to be treated seriously, but we got to at the same time allow people to run their business and put food on the table. And so my number one priority in the Senate, I've now served you 9 years in the Senate, which it's hard to believe it's been 9 years. Time really flies. It wasn't too long ago where I was this unknown candidate running in 2012 and up in East Texas, and you guys played a big part in sending me to the Senate to begin with. But my number one priority every day has been jobs. Jobs, with very much a laser focus. And the reason is I believe that's the top priority of Texans. And I consistently see it every part of the state, whether East Texas, West Texas, the Panhandle, or the Valley. People want jobs. They want to be able to work. They want to provide for their families. The reason people come to Texas is we're not bat crap crazy. We let people actually work, and the only thing that constrains what you can do in life is your aspirations and your willingness to work hard, roll up your sleeves, and put your skills and talent towards accomplishing a goal. And that's the essence of Texas. When it comes to jobs, one of the things I understand is that it's not government that creates the jobs. It is each of you. It is the men and women on this call. Y'all are on the front line creating jobs, but government can do an awful lot to screw it up. And government is very good at that. And the two greatest levers that government has to create an environment where jobs are plentiful are tax reform and regulatory reform. Reducing our tax burden, simplifying our tax code, repealing job-killing regulations, both of those. And we saw during the last 4 years where we had a Republican president, and for 2 of them, we had a Republican Congress as well. We passed the biggest tax cut of a generation. We repealed job-killing regulations, and the result was an incredible economic boom. Prior to COVID, the economy was booming. We had the lowest unemployment in decades, and we were seeing the real results of common sense economic policy. We've come through this pandemic. We're now at a point where we need to be coming into a recovery. We're starting to see that. I'll tell you, I'm very worried about Washington. I'm very worried about the Biden administration with a Democratic House and Democratic Senate. It is right now, the Democratic Party in Washington is driven by the extreme left. It's driven by the Bernie Sanders and the Elizabeth Warrens and the AOCs. I think we're going to see over the next couple of years, I think we're going to see much higher taxes. We're going to see a massive tax increase coming from Washington Democrats. We're going to see new regulations that are going to make it harder for your small businesses to prosper and thrive. And my intention, I'm doing everything I can to fight against policies that hurt Texas, to fight against policies that hurt jobs, to fight against policies that take away your freedoms. But I'll say, with a bit of good news, I think there's a natural pendulum to politics. And right now, the Democrats are going way too far to the left. And I think the natural reaction is the American people are likely to shift back in a direction of greater common sense and greater sanity. And I think that means that we're going to have a very good election in 2022 and a very good election in 2024. But we got to make it through the next 2 years and the next 4 years first. And so that's very much what I'm focused on doing. And with that, let's open it up and answer questions.
Absolutely. So you started down the road of my first question. We do have a couple of questions, but I'd like to start by taking a few minutes. What legislation are you sponsoring? Are you looking at and saying, okay, this is good legislation, even things that you can walk across the aisle, have those conversations and say, okay, we can move forward on this. And then what are those pieces of legislation that you say, this one is harmful, we really need to keep an eye on this?
Yeah, so in terms of bipartisan legislation, there's areas of cooperation where you can move things forward. So for example, I've spent 6 years as the chairman of the space subcommittee, and space obviously is a big deal for the state of Texas, a lot of jobs in the state of Texas. And I have written and passed multiple pieces of bipartisan legislation concerning space, concerning NASA, authorizing NASA, expanding commercial space. And on that, I've been able to get Democrats together, Republicans together, and we've been able to pass it. I've had major legislation signed by Barack Obama, major legislation signed by Donald Trump concerning space. And you think about it, it's not that often that you have a significant area of legislation, some signed by Obama, some signed by Trump. That doesn't happen too often. So there are opportunities for those kind of victories. With the Biden administration, one of the areas where there's some bipartisan possibilities concerns Nord Stream 2, which is a natural gas pipeline that is being built between Russia and Germany. And I've been leading the effort to stop that pipeline. That pipeline, I think, would be very harmful. It'd be very harmful to Europe. It'd be very harmful to America. And it'd be very beneficial to Putin. It would put billions of dollars in Putin's pockets to use for military adventurism and aggressiveness. And it would make Europe even more dependent on Russian gas than it is now and subject to economic blackmail. So I've authored 2 different pieces of legislation that are targeted sanctions aimed at stopping that pipeline from being constructed. Both of them are bipartisan. I teamed up with a Democrat, Jeanne Shaheen from New Hampshire, on both of those bills. We've passed them now twice. And for over a year, we halted the pipeline. The first sanctions bill was signed into law. If I remember correctly, it was a Thursday night at 7 p.m. They halted construction at 6:45 p.m., literally 15 minutes before the bill went into effect. And so it was surgical in terms of how the sanctions were structured. The pipeline lay dormant. It's about 90 to 95% complete, but I like to point out a 95% complete pipeline is 0% complete. It don't work till you connect both ends. At this point, it's a hunk of metal in the bottom of the ocean.
We're very aware of that in East Texas, right?
So we had this pipeline shut down. Putin and Angela Merkel are very unhappy about it. The bad news is the Joe Biden administration came in, and just a couple of weeks after Biden was elected, Putin went back to building the pipeline because he believed the Biden administration would let him complete it. I have been leaning on the Biden administration aggressively to stop that. In fact, I put a hold on every nominee they had at the Department of State and ended up negotiating a deal with them where the Secretary of State agreed to come out with a strong statement committing to sanctioning any companies involved, which hopefully will put the brakes on this. But that's an area where we've had bipartisan agreement. We may be able to continue. Now, the second part of your question is, where are we going to have partisan differences? Listen, I told you, this Democratic Party, this is not your father's Democratic Party. It is driven by big government, tax and spend socialists. Let me give you a few examples. We just passed a couple of weeks ago a $1.9 trillion porculus bill. The Democrats called it a COVID relief bill, but it wasn't a COVID relief bill. Just 9% of the bill was focused on healthcare spending for COVID. 91% was unrelated projects. It was every liberal wish list priority they had to pay off their political cronies and their political buddies. It sent tens of billions of dollars to big blue states to bail them out. And, you know, it's a shame Joe Biden was not willing to pass bipartisan COVID relief legislation, because it would have been easy to do. And I would point out, you know, look, in a lot of areas of life, talk's cheap. Last year, Republicans had control of the Senate, and we passed bipartisan COVID relief legislation, not once, not twice, not 3 times, 5 times. We rolled up our sleeves, we went to work, and we brought Democrats and Republicans together. If Joe Biden had been willing to come together with a package focused on vaccines and distributing the vaccines, focus on help for small businesses and the PPP program, focusing on families that are hurting, focusing on getting kids back in school, one of the huge priorities. There are millions of kids across this country that are still not back in school. If we'd come together and focused on that, you could have gotten all or virtually all the senators to come together and say, this is a good idea. Biden and Schumer and Pelosi said, no, we want a hard left partisan bill. House of Representatives, they got 0 Republican votes. The Senate, they got 0 Republican votes. They didn't want them. Instead, they sent stimulus checks to illegal aliens and to criminals in prison. So I introduced an amendment to say, let's not send $1,400 stimulus checks to millions of illegal immigrants. Every single Democrat voted no. It failed by a single vote. If one Democrat in the Senate had said, okay, we shouldn't be sending $1,400 checks to every illegal immigrant in America, then it would have passed, but not a single Democrat did it. I also introduced an amendment to say, let's not send stimulus checks to criminals in prison, currently incarcerated criminals. Every single Democrat voted no. It failed by 1 vote. If even a single Democrat had said, you know, murderers, rapists, child molesters, if you got a mass murder, if you got someone in Huntsville there for multiple murders, maybe we shouldn't send them a check right now. That would have passed. Every Democrat voted no. I tell that story to illustrate just how partisan they are right now. I think when they take up taxes in the next couple of months, it's going to be a huge tax increase. And from all indications, they're not going to talk to Republicans. They don't want any Republican votes. They don't care what we think. And the only question is how much your taxes are going up. Everyone's taxes are going up. The question is just how high they're going to press them. And so I'm going to press against it because I want small businesses to survive and grow and prosper and create jobs, and hammering small businesses with taxes and regulations hurts that, but we're going to have huge battles on that front.
So I'll segue that conversation into the next question. We appreciate any focus, obviously being a regional group that's focused on our chambers of commerce. Our ultimate goal is to bring value to our members, right? And so as little taxation as we're still recovering from a pandemic. Sure. Our restaurants, our gyms, they've been hurt, and they're another issue that is transitioning that's really causing some issues for them. And I'll just read the question. At a time when millions of Americans are unemployed, many of our local businesses are struggling to hire qualified candidates for full-time work. I've spoken with several business owners in our service territory, and I hear their frustration of not being able to incentivize employees to come to work. Yep. Several have resorted to providing additional bonuses for showing up and just staying a full shift. Have we over incentivized unemployment benefits, and how do we encourage employees to return to our workforce? We have businesses ready to build a product, and yet people aren't showing up.
Now, it is a big problem. The answer to the question, have we over incentivized not working? Of course we have. And listen, I understand at the height of the pandemic, when people were scared, when it wasn't clear what was going to happen, there were a lot of steps that were taken early on, but Congress stepped in with a massive plus up to unemployment. When we did so, I joined with a number of other Republicans in introducing an amendment to say that under no circumstances should unemployment exceed what you were making in your job. A real common sense principle that they shouldn't pay you more to sit on your couch and watch Gilligan's Island than you made going to the office. Every Democrat voted no. And in fact, I had a big debate with Dick Durbin Democrat from Illinois on the Senate floor, where Durbin said, "You're just saying everyone who's unemployed is lazy and shiftless." And I said, well, no, it's exactly the opposite, which is I want people to get back to work and I want to incentivize work. And if you pay people substantially more, look, there were people who were being paid, and this is not an exaggeration, twice as much to stay home as they were being paid on their job. I said, listen, people love their kids. If you pay them more to stay home than to work, a lot of people are going to say, I got to provide for my family, so I'm going to do that. But you're not doing them a favor in the long term, even though those incentives in the short term people are going to take. I think people want to work. I think there's a dignity to work. I think there's a self-respect to coming home and putting groceries on the table that you've worked for, you provided. And not only that, but people are gaining skills and they're climbing the economic ladder. What y'all understand on this call is the job someone has today may not be the job they have 2 years from now, 5 years from now, or 10 years from now. But it's as you earn skills in the workplace, you make yourself a more valuable employee and you're able to produce more value, and that you climb the economic ladder. And so paying millions of people to stay home is hurting them, not just now, but it's hurting them for decades to come. The weird thing about Democrats, they don't seem to understand incentives. I actually thought that debate was striking because it was like what Durbin and I were talking about were ships passing in the night. He characterized it as a morality play, that people out of work are good and you're saying they're bad. And I'm like, no, they're good, but I want to give them good incentives so that they make choices that are good for them. So yes, it is a problem. The current federal unemployment plus up is not as high as it used to be, so the incentives are not as acute. Right. But it remains a real problem. There's still people being paid more not to work than they were to work, and that is functioning as a drag on our economy.
Notice several of the comments have kind of annotated the raise in the minimum wage in that conversation, kind of how this whole incentive plus a raise in minimum wage increase. Can you talk to that? I know we've only got you for about another minute.
Yeah, look, so Democrats are pushing hard to raise the minimum wage, not just raise it, double it. So take it up to $15 an hour. And you know, look, in a place like East Texas, that would be devastating. That would hammer a lot of small businesses. You know, I see my friend Jeff Austin on the call. You know, Jeff, you know, fancy bankers, that wouldn't hurt him much because he's paying people more than that. But you know, what the nonpartisan. Now Jeff's going to be in trouble going, wait, I got to pay people more than $15 an hour? Yeah, you do. You're a banker, Jeff. You got to do that. You know, the nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office estimated that if the Democrats' doubling of the minimum wage went into effect, 1.4 million Americans would lose their jobs. And the thing to understand about it is the people who would lose their jobs, frankly, it's not many of the people on this call. People on this call, y'all have spent years building a business, working. The folks on this call are making more than $15 an hour. The people who lose their job, they tend to be low income. Many of them are teenagers. Many of them are African American. Many of them are Hispanic. They're kids who are getting their first job. And, you know, an analogy, I've told this story a lot, of my dad. You know, my dad came from Cuba in 1957. And he came to Texas. He came to go to University of Texas. And when my dad showed up in Austin, his very first job was washing dishes. He made 50 cents an hour. And the reason he got that job, he was 18, he couldn't speak English. And you didn't have to speak English to wash dishes. You could just scrub it under hot water. He could do that. And that 50 cents an hour, the analogy I've used is if some well-meaning liberal politician had come in and raised the minimum wage to $2 an hour, you know what they would have done? They'd have fired my dad and bought a dishwasher. And in every business, every one of you has a choice between labor and capital, and you're making a trade-off. And so I point out to people all the time, when I talk to young people, I say, hey, have you ever gone to a restaurant and ordered on an iPad? And most people kind of nod. They start seeing those come in. I said, you know what you're looking at? You're looking at a $15 an hour waitress. There used to be a human being that had that job. But that hunk of metal, that iPad, doesn't charge an hourly rate, and it doesn't ask for benefits. And if you price labor out of the market, Business owners are going to replace it with capital. And the point I make about my dad, I say, look, people say you can't live even in 1957 on 50 cents an hour. And he was hurting. 50 cents an hour was not much money then. And he was paying his way through school. But what y'all understand is you don't stay at that job forever. So my dad learned English pretty quickly. Then he got promoted. His second job was as a cook, same restaurant, same place he'd been washing dishes. They hired him as a cook. They paid him 80 cents an hour. 80 cents an hour is a lot better than 50 cents an hour. He liked that a lot. And then his next job was as a teaching assistant at UT, teaching math to undergrads. And his next job after that was as a computer programmer at IBM. And he went on to start a small business. And today, as many of you know, my dad's a pastor. That is a journey all of us understand. That's the American dream. And when you jack up the minimum wage, what you do is you chop off the bottom couple of rungs of the ladder. And there are a whole bunch of people that just get left behind because they can't get started getting those skills. And the problem is virtually every Democrat in the Senate is prepared to raise the minimum wage, and they don't understand anything about economics. They've never run a small business. They have no idea about the people whose jobs they're taking away. They just believe giving away free money. I like telling them, well, gosh, if it's just a matter of government raising wages, why are you so cheap? Why not a $30 minimum wage? Why not 50? Why not 100? I mean, wouldn't people like to make $100 an hour? Can't we just decree everyone gets $100 an hour? And that threat, they're going to keep pushing. And so I'm very worried. Whether or not that happens, I think depends on whether or not the filibuster goes away. There's a huge push among Democrats to end the filibuster. Filibuster requires 60 votes to pass most kinds of legislation through the Senate. If they end it, we're going to see terrible legislation move. If they don't end it, then Senate Republicans will have some ability to stop some of the worst things. So we'll be able to stop, for example, packing the Supreme Court. The extreme left wants to add 4 left-wing justices to the Supreme Court. You know, last year I wrote a new book called One Vote Away, How a Single Seat on the Supreme Court can change history. And it walked through all of our fundamental liberties, free speech, religious liberty, the Second Amendment. And it told war stories of big landmark cases that I litigated at the Supreme Court, where our fundamental rights hang by a single vote, a single thread. And it makes clear just how fragile those rights are. And that book I wrote last fall, it became the #1 bestseller in the country on Amazon. And I think it's because people care about our rights and they want to understand the inside story of what goes on behind it. Well, look, the Democrats, if they end the filibuster, they want to add 4 new justices to the Supreme Court and take away all those fundamental rights. And so the filibuster stops all of that. The bad news is tax increases they can pass even with the filibuster because there's a special procedural vehicle called budget reconciliation that's going to let them raise taxes. And so they're going to do that.
Well, Senator Cruz, thank you so much. I know that we only had you for a limited time today, and we've got several other speakers. Thank you so much for advocating for East Texas, taking our East Texas values, taking our business climate and saying, hey, we need to fight for our businesses. You've got to fight ahead specifically when it comes to taxation. If there is a certain item that we can help advocate for from the East Texas Coalition, from the Chambers of Commerce, from the U.S. Chambers of Commerce, please let us know how we can join in the fight and we can advocate for good policy that's helpful to our businesses. Thank you again for joining us today.
Well, thank you, Mark. I love you guys. I look forward next time to doing it in person. And I will say, you know, there are some good things in life. After all, right now, 50% of the Final Four are Texas teams. So there are things to cheer about. And watching Houston and Baylor go at it is going to be fun. It's the bad news is one of the Texas teams is going to have to lose. The good news is we'll have a Texas team in the finals and hopefully win it all.
That's right. That's right. Thank you so much, everybody. I appreciate it. And we'll go on to our next speaker. Have a great day, Senator Cruz.
Take care.
Appreciate it. Well, thank you, everybody, for joining that portion. And next, then I'm going to do a functional check with Jill. Jill, do we have Senator Cornyn's office on? Is Senator Cornyn with us?
I do not have him as of yet. Oh, wait. Yes, I do. Let me double check. Yes. I'm gonna,
I know there's some functional crossover between the two, but if you could just see if there's a.
close.
I think we're good to go.
Yep, there we go.
There he is. Oh my goodness. Either you've got a moving background or you are with us from the passenger seat of a vehicle.
We're on the road, but glad to be able to join you.
Senator Cornyn, thank you so much for joining us today. Mark Robinson with the Southwestern Electric Power and Governmental Affairs and part of the East Texas Coalition. Appreciate you joining us. I'll do a quick introduction and then we'll jump into questions. And Senator Cornyn was first elected to the United States Senate in 2002 and is currently serving his fourth term after being reelected 2008, 2014, and 2020. He sits on the Senate Finance, Intelligence, and Judiciary Committees, where he helps craft legislation on behalf of 29 million Texans. From 2013 to 2018, Senator Cornyn was chosen by his colleagues to serve as the Republican whip, the second highest ranking position in the Senate Republican Conference. A San Antonio native, go Spurs. Sorry, I had to throw that in. Senator Cornyn has served the people of Texas for nearly 4 decades as a district judge, a member of and a member of the Texas Supreme Court, a Texas Attorney General before representing the Lone Star State in the United States Senate. Serves on so many of our committees, so many subcommittees representing East Texas and really all of Texas. Senator Cornyn, thank you so much for being here today. I would like to start out with just you saying hi to everybody on the call and then jumping into what you're seeing right now in the legislative environment in DC, what you're sponsoring, what you're excited about, and then maybe some things that concern you on a business side that we should be looking at and paying attention to.
Well, thank you, Mark, and thanks to all of you for organizing this event. Thanks for your flexibility, letting me do this on the road. I wish we were all together in person, but I'm optimistic that with more and more people getting vaccinated, that we'll be able to gather together in person soon. As I said, the number of people getting vaccinated in Texas is growing by the day, and I think we're over 10 million shots in arms so far. And I know that the state has now opened up vaccinations to every adult. Hopefully we can keep that pace going. Over the last year, though, we've all been through a pretty traumatic pandemic. And I know that many of our businesses, many of you on the call have been struggling. And unfortunately, even some businesses will not make it through the recession that was part of the pandemic. But last year, Congress, of course, passed 5 bills with overwhelming bipartisan support to support our fight against the virus, and as well as to ease the impact on our small businesses, workers, and families. Many of you utilize the Paycheck Protection Program, which has paid out more than $16 billion to Texas businesses across more than 276,000 loans. Some small, some not so small, but it seems like that's one of the most effective things we were able to do. The relief bill that was signed into law before the end of last year made it possible for our small businesses to take a second draw of funding. And last week, Congress extended the application deadline to May 31, so more businesses could take advantage. As I said, the PPP has helped countless Texas jobs and small businesses over the last year. I also have to give a shout out to our Texas bankers who did a great job working with the Small Business Administration in getting the money out the door to our small businesses. It's logistically hard to spend that money, but our bankers stepped up, and we appreciate their helpfulness in getting that money to its intended target soon. Unfortunately, some of our small businesses were not eligible for the PPP. For example, live performance venues. These were among the first to close their doors when the pandemic hit, and they'll be among the last to reopen. That's one reason I introduced a bill called Save Our Stages Act, that provides relief for live entertainment venues, and I'm glad it was included in the December relief bill. This legislation established the Shuttered Venue Operators Grant Program, which will provide more than $16 billion in grants to shuttered.
Senator Cornyn, I'm not sure if you are still with us, but I can't hear you right now. It did look like he was driving through some rural area. And so we will give him a second to rejoin. Jill, do you see his screen or has it disappeared?
Yeah, he's disappeared.
Okay. Excellent. Well, look, life's going to throw you curveballs. And I'm pretty sure that he's going to rejoin us here in a little while. But until then, and Jill, if you could just kind of wave at me or do something to let me know that someone is back. If he does not rejoin, obviously he intends to be here. He has prepared notes and speaking points. But if he does not, our next speaker is at 11:50. And if you could let us know when someone from Representative Gohmert's on. Okay, it says David Cleveland said he is on but muted.
Right. I don't, hang on. Oh, here he is.
Okay, we're seeing him. Senator Cornyn, as soon as we can hear you, we will yield the floor back to you. Maybe it's a good time to talk about rural broadband initiatives and connectivity. I'm not sure.
Was asked to unmute. Why can't I?
Okay, Mark, I think I'm back with you.
You are back again. I can hear you. I can see you. We were joking that we may be talking about rural connectivity and broadband issues a little bit.
That's a great segue. A great segue. Let me just conclude by saying that we worked hard to try to meet the need, both in terms of funding research and for therapeutics and now the vaccine. And we've seen our scientists, our researchers, our medical and health personnel come up with a vaccine in a really a historically short time period. And so I know we're all beginning to see a little light at the end of the tunnel. Finally, let me just say, I know that many of you wondered what in the world is going on with this $1.9 trillion bill that was signed into law a few weeks ago after all of the bipartisan cooperation we'd seen last year. Unfortunately, our Democratic colleagues simply didn't want to make it a bipartisan bill, nor did they really want to make it a COVID-19 relief bill. Only about 10% of the bill actually included COVID-19 relief. Call me crazy, but I think pandemic relief legislation should be mainly about the pandemic, not about an unrelated partisan agenda. Finally, let me just say, I know that Senator Cruz preceded me, and I know he probably talked about our trip to the border, where we took a number of our Senate colleagues, hopefully to help educate them about conditions there. Unfortunately, the Biden administration undid all of the previous rules that addressed our border and asylum seekers. Unfortunately, they did that without having an alternate plan in place, and that's on top of the pandemic. So this is going to be a problem that we're going to have to try to figure out how to solve. It's not going to be something the Biden administration is going to be able to do alone. There's going to have to be bipartisan support to modify the asylum process, because the human smugglers and the drug smugglers have figured out how we operate, and they're figured out how to avoid detection and detention of people coming across the border illegally. So with that, let me stop and take a few questions.
Well, that segues perfectly into our first question. You have been willing to cross the aisle, have those hard conversations, whether it's immigration or taxes. We appreciate that mindset. As we said at the beginning of this call, this is a regional group. The fact that I get to say Lindale, Tyler, Kilgore, Longview, all in the same sentence, and we're all pushing in the same direction, I really appreciate that, and I appreciate that mentality. So here's the question. Starts with a thank you for serving on the subcommittee on immigration, citizenship, and border safety. There is currently an intense national focus on the impacts of border and immigration policies. We have many corporations in East Texas that utilize the J-1 visa, H-1B visa, H-2 visa, etc., and indicate that they could use more participants to boost productivity and grow their business. Do you anticipate any increase in the number of annual work permits allowed or a change in eligibility requirements to meet the demands of current employment needs? So workforce, visa, and border security.
Yeah, Mark, I know that these workers are critical in a number of local businesses, and I hope the Biden administration will listen to East Texans. Right now, we know that President Biden has rescinded a previous proclamation that barred issuance of employment-based permits. We're still waiting for decisions on visas.
Boy, I was hoping to really hear that answer. Senator Corner, if you can hear me, you are kind of coming in and out again. Apologize for the quality of the call, but if someone can let me know if they see or hear him again. Obviously, this is something, and I'll speak until Jill just wave at me. We have had several of our members say, absolutely, we utilize a lot of the participants from a J-1 or a H-1B, H-2B visas. We have to have those. We would like to have more of those workers. They're great workers. And so to us, and can you wave again? Okay. Senator Corner, are you back on?
I don't have video of him, but I have.
His screen is back up.
Okay.
Yeah, Mark, I think we just
Okay.
need to make sure that I think we need to encourage legal immigration and following the legal systems for people to come work temporarily in the United States and discourage the illegal system. So I'm with you. We'll continue to work to make sure those visas are restored and available.
Okay, very good. So, and again, apologize for the interference there. But what I heard was encourage legal immigration, discourage illegal immigration. Okay, very good. And I think I can fit that on a bumper sticker somewhere. Second question. I know we've got you for about five more minutes. We've talked a little bit about the 1 trillion, and it's a little hard to say that. Maybe more used to saying billion than trillion, but the $1.9 trillion American Rescue Plan. It's been called many different things, but obviously this is going to come with an elevated taxation on business. There's some concern not just about national tax, but international tax policies that put American businesses at a disadvantage. Can you talk about where the estimated footing of that bill is going to be at for that $1.9 trillion?
Mark, we've spent an unbelievable amount of money, but at least up until the end of the year, I felt like we were all together in responding to a national emergency. And we needed to do what we needed to do in order to help small businesses and defeat the virus. But what we saw with the 1.9 trillion was something completely different. It was 10% about COVID-19, but 90% for other unrelated issues that our Democratic colleagues felt like they had the opportunity to get passed, but again, to sort of change the country, unfortunately, rather than to solve a problem. So 2017, we passed the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, which I think was one of the reasons why our economy was as strong as it was leading up to the beginning of the pandemic. Unfortunately, back after the Great Recession of 2009, Barack Obama said raising taxes during a recession is a bad idea. But unfortunately, I think the Biden administration had forgotten that. And we're anticipating a tax bill this spring. We're reading that they plan to raise the corporate tax from 21 to 28%. Don't know what they would do for pass-through businesses, subchapter S corporations, and individuals making over $400,000 a year, they said would be the target. I mentioned the pass-throughs because, of course, many people run their business as a pass-through, and so they pay their business income on their personal tax return. So when they say they limit it to $400,000, it's not clear to me that they would continue the current tax status for pass-throughs, or whether those pass-through businesses would see their personal income taxed at a higher level when they raise the individual tax marginal tax rate. So unfortunately, they can do this with 51 votes. If every Democrat votes for it, along with Kamala Harris, who can break the tie, along with the House, they can do it. But we're playing defense. I feel like, this may be the Final Four is coming up here pretty quick. And I heard Ted say, great to have two Texas teams, but we're playing to a full court press in the Senate too, playing the toughest defense we know how, because I think over the next year and a half or so, that's where we're going to be until we have an election in 2022, that I'm pretty optimistic about the outcome of that, together with 3 new congressional districts in Texas, by the way, which will add to our strength as the delegation in Washington, D.C. But it's going to be bumpy here in the interim. So hang in there with us. We're going to give it everything we got. And God bless all of you.
Thank you so much, Senator Corner, for joining us today. I just appreciate you taking time out. And from the East Texas Coalition, a regional group of chambers, as well as our business members that are here, thank you for advocating for a strong business climate in East Texas. We'll do our part to keep people employed, and please just help us with the taxes. Make sure that we're being able to pay people a fair wage. Not too much, not too little, but just, and again, for balancing that conversation across the aisle, being willing to have hard conversations on either side of that aisle. We do appreciate that. Thank you for joining us today.
We call that the Goldilocks tax rate. Not too much, not too little, not too warm, not too cold. But we'll keep fighting, Mark, and thanks for having me. Take care.
Thank you so much. Safe journeys. All right, so that was our second of 3 speakers. And Jill, I'm going to do a functional check again with you. Is Congressman Louis Gohmert on? And I can't hear you, even though it doesn't say muted.
Unmute me. Congressman Gohmert, can I get you to unmute there you go. Okay. Yes, we're ready to go, Mark.
Oh my goodness. And last but not least, so we've had 3 speakers, started with Senator Cruz, went to Senator Cornyn, and now Congressman Louis Gohmert. And Congressman Gohmert, it is great to have you on the call today. I'm excited to have you join, give you a quick introduction, hit you with a question, and then we're going to let you go out the gate. But it's good to see you this morning. Congressman Louis Gohmert is serving his 8th term in the United States House of Representatives and was first sworn in on January 4th, 2005. He proudly represents the 1st District of Texas, which encompasses more than 12 counties, stretching nearly 120 miles down the state's eastern border with Louisiana. Congressman Gohmert serves on the House Judiciary Committee, playing a vital role on the Constitution, civil rights, civil and Homeland Security subcommittees. He is also a member of the House Natural Resources Committee, serving on the National Parks, Forests, and Public Land Subcommittee, and is honored to have the title of Republican Leader on the Subcommittee on Oversight and Investigations. Currently serves as a Republican leader of the Natural Resources Committee. Again, just thank you so much for joining us today, Congressman Gohmert. This is part of the East Texas Coalition. It's a regional group of chambers from Lindale, Tyler, Kilgore, and Longview that have come together to advocate for East Texas public policy, making East Texas a better place to do business and to have a strong business environment. Thank you so much for joining us today, sir.
Well, thank you, Mark. I really appreciate y'all setting this up. It's a fantastic idea. And I'm grateful to be on it with our 2 great senators. So thank you. There is so much going on in Washington. Unfortunately, so much of it is not good. And in fact, we had the biggest part of our Texas delegation was down here in McAllen. We just had a press conference, and I spoke right before we got on. But it is a huge problem. Anybody that thinks it's just a border problem or a Texas problem, they're wrong, because as we know, as I've pointed out for years now, having spent so much time all hours of the night and day here, people come across the border and they're being shipped all over the country. And the Border Patrol here has said, the cartels are calling us their logistics. They get people across the border and then they ship them. The U.S. government, U.S. taxpayer ships them all over the country. So it's a very dangerous situation, and it's very unfortunate that this administration has undone the things. I've been hearing it from the Border Patrol most of last night. Got in around 3 this morning. Being out last night was my night to be in charge with the Texas delegation. And so I took them down the dirt roads. They went in places they'd never dreamed of. But we just saw so many people here. Let me say, a lot more women and children than I've ever seen down here. And they're coming because the Biden administration is dangling amnesty out there. But it's so difficult for our healthcare providers. An estimate is that at least 10% of those coming in illegally have COVID, just when Texas has been doing all the right things, reopening, all of that's been great. And of course, we've heard gloom and doom from the Biden administration, but we haven't really seen a big uptick since Texas has been opening more. But one of the things that I proposed, and I actually provided President Trump with language that would prevent liability for businesses so they couldn't be sued successfully, claiming that somebody got COVID in their place of business. And that is something that President Trump continued to say we have got to do, but the Democrats were determined they were not going to let that pass. So it didn't get done. We'd worked some language and bills in the House, but the Senate, with their cloture rules, were not able to get anything done. But that is very important to get the economy rolling the way it should. Who would have ever dreamed that Joe Biden, as much as he was decrying fossil fuels and was lambasting energy companies, that he would be the reason that Exxon stock went from the $30-something to over $60. Well, it's because his actions have run up the price of fuel. And I'll never forget a lady that was in her 80s from Carthage was telling me years ago, when the price of energy was shooting up under the Obama administration, she said, I'm really getting concerned. The price of my energy is just getting too high. And I'm afraid that I'm going to end up as a person who was born in a home where our only energy was a wood burning stove. I may die in a home where all I can have is a wood burning stove. And I said, I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but the Obama administration is trying to get rid of wood burning stoves. So she wouldn't have even had anything. But anyway, we are so blessed in East Texas. The quote attributed to Churchill was that the Allies floated to victory on a pool of East Texas oil. And, now out of 36 congressional districts, our East Texas district is the largest provider in Texas of natural gas. So in West Texas now, with Permian Basin, Midland, Odessa area, they became the largest supplier of oil in the state of Texas. But it's a tightrope to walk between prices not getting too high that people can't afford gasoline or propane, different oil products, and being healthy enough where Texas continues to grow and prosper. Our air and water has continued to get cleaner every year. And as all of you know, we've got more people moving into Texas from other states than any other state except Florida. And Ron DeSantis, my good friend that's governor now, he's doing a great job there as well. But some of the things that we've been pushing for, there's actually bills that would try to prevent the Democrats from making it so tough to do business. One of the bills I recently filed was a bill that would require the Biden administration to have to live by all of the executive orders and all of the laws that are being put, the mandates on businesses, to hopefully give them the message they got to slow it down. They got to quit trying to destroy business and people just trying to get things going again. We also have the American Jobs First Act that Mo Brooks had put together and I've sponsored. It would amend the Immigration Act to make it easier to have help you needed, but without doing damage to the country, to the economy, to schools like we're seeing now. Anyway, yeah, there are a number of bills that we think will help the economy, but just like in the Senate, when you've got a majority who don't want to see the things that we know will make businesses grow, it's kind of tough. Right now, we're playing more goalie, trying to get the worst legislation out of the net.
I appreciate that update, and it's always great to hear, even if it is DC news from South Texas. It's great to hear what y'all are working on. I have several questions I'd like to ask. We've talked a little bit about energy. Thank you for serving on the Committee for Natural Resources. I know that keeps you involved in a lot of these conversations. The question is stated this way: several weeks ago during Snowmageddon, I've heard it called Snowvid 21, Snowmageddon, Snowpocalypse. All these, we were reminded of the importance of having a robust energy delivery system and a dynamic electrical grid. Energy production has always played an important role in our East Texas business portfolio. Every one of our chambers, I know, has legislative priorities and public policy priorities about energy. What legislation do you see that could potentially harm our ability to produce and transport energy? And vice versa, are you seeing any that could positively impact that ability?
Well, of course, we've seen with the executive orders, the president placed more land off limits and placed federal land off limits for drilling. And there are a number of bills in our committee to remove land from being susceptible to being mined for rare earth minerals that are needed for so much of our high-tech industry. If we don't, we're one of the few countries that have such minerals. And if we, that actually forces us to buy those minerals from China. And I know China's been pleased with this administration. We're being forced to, or some industries being forced to look back to going to China under the policies to just stay afloat. But when you have to buy rare earth minerals from China just to keep our industries going in the high-tech area, it's really a dangerous situation. We are battling bills constantly in natural resources that would bring an end to offshore drilling and make it a law that you cannot lease federal land for drilling or mining. So those are things that would really put us at a disadvantage. China and Russia, they love these things because it means America is going to have to buy more from China, and more countries will have to buy energy from Russia, their oil, their gas. So these are really dangerous to American industry. We were told in the previous, in the Obama administration, that there were some jobs Americans wouldn't do, and that these manufacturing jobs were gone for good. And all it took was President Trump leveling the playing field, and we were able to get these manufacturing jobs back. And we've seen industries popping up around East Texas. That's been a great thing. But if they are able to put more of these policies in place, and if they're able to pass some of the bills, then you're going to see more and more of the energy production dry up in East Texas. And that sure provides an awful lot of resources for the rest of the economy. Now, after the problems in the late 80s, we saw our economies diversified more around East Texas so that we could weather the storm, so to speak, for attacks on energy. But in this, as you referred to, Mark, the Snowmageddon, where so many people lost energy, electricity, it wasn't because we were not capable, but there was a report 10 years ago that told Texas, you've got the capability to produce all the energy you need, having our own separate grid. However, these facilities and this ability to produce and transmit, they're not winterized. And so we didn't winterize the valves that would allow the gas to flow in intense freezing situations. You know, my whole life in East Texas, my whole life except 4 years at Fort Benning, has been in East Texas. I've never seen temperatures in my home like that, like we all have in this last Snowmageddon. But we could have weathered it, but we didn't properly winterize, as the reports had said 10 years ago. And instead, we were using a lot of available money to have solar, to have wind, and those are fine, but they're referred to federally as intermittent sources of energy because they don't produce all the time. So when they were failing to produce, some of the windmills froze up. They turn on the gas or trying to get more gas coming. It didn't work because we hadn't properly winterized. And I did feel like ERCOT ought to go away. And I've talked to some of the regulators in Austin who felt like really the Public Utilities Commission could go back to overseeing electrical production and do just as well as, or better rather, than ERCOT. Here we're spending all this massive amount of money on ERCOT. They don't produce a single watt of electricity. The other thing, though, we're trying to fight, though, and Senator Schumer talked about it as the leader of the Senate, that, gee, Texas has shown they just can't handle producing their own energy and going it alone. So we need to federalize Texas Energy and the Texas grid. No, we don't. And hopefully that is something. I know we've got people like Henry Cuellar on the other side of the aisle and others who understand we're okay producing our energy. It was some of the federal incentives to go wind, go solar that caused us not to spend the money we should have on winterizing our constant energy sources. We don't need the federal government taking over that. We also don't need the federal government taking over the election systems. We've had our biggest problems since 2001 when the federal government has said you got to have electronic ballots or electronic voting. We didn't have the kind of problems that we've been having recently, and it was all part of the federalization in 2001 and these, unfunded mandates. So these are things, all of which we're trying to fight. We're trying to keep from the federal government taking over Texas. And so any suggestions, and in fact, it was a year ago, businessman in Marshall's the one that suggested, hey, we got to do something about liability. This PPP is very helpful. And that's when we put together the language that I got to the president, but he could not get everybody that we needed on board at that time. So there are a lot of things we're trying to keep out of the net. There are a lot of things we're trying to get Democrats to support so that we can help East Texas.
Very good. I've got one other question. And yes, for those watching, my camera did fall over in my office. It's real here. So it did. A lot of concerns about the $1.9 trillion relief fund, stimulus package, whatever you want to call it. And let me take this. We asked Senator Cornyn about this as well. But can we take this into the global competitiveness of our businesses? We have a lot of our businesses that compete internationally for projects. What does that do to our ability, not only as Texans to compete with the rest of the nation, but really Texans to compete with the rest of the world?
We can compete with anybody in the world. There's no question. The problem is when we don't have a level playing field. As a historian, I've never been a fan of tariffs, but as I told President Trump, I'm not going to vote to take away your leverage to try to get a level playing field out of places like China. And he also used the threat of tariffs with Mexico to get them to help out on our massive illegal immigration issues. And they did cooperate just from the threat. But having talked privately to President Trump, I knew he would prefer not to ever have tariffs, but that was his leverage. He used it. He got some better deals. But I don't know, in East Texas, the sky ought to be the limit. And our biggest problem is when the federal government gets involved. Texas has been a right to work state where, it's land of the free. And yet we've had Democrats that want to eliminate secret ballots in voting for or against unionizing. They want to be able to have union organizers corner people and demand that they vote, sign on and vote for the unionization, and they ought to be able to make their own secret ballot decisions. In fact, I'd previously given Steny Hoyer a hard time, and I said, I understand you may vote against this bill that eliminates secret ballots in union organizing. And he said, the odds of that happening are infinitesimal. And I said, well, it's just that everybody knows that you would not be majority leader. John Murtha would have been majority leader back when you guys took the majority before, if it hadn't been for the secret ballot. Because Pelosi had told people, I want John Murtha to be majority leader, but because it was a secret ballot, Steny Hoyer won. So it's a little hypocritical to say we got to eliminate the secret ballot for unionizing when secret ballot's the only thing that got Steny elected originally as majority leader. But these are all things that would be impediments to East Texas East Texas economy and economic boom. And we're trying to make sure that business people are free to do what they believe is best for their business.
And if you see some legislation that's coming across that could be particularly harmful, if you don't mind, we all have governmental affairs committees. We love advocating for these things, giving you local examples, but we are somewhat cautious about upcoming taxation, specifically to businesses. Don't know how it's going to be, whether it's corporate tax or whether it's income tax. We're not sure exactly what those percentages look like, but they do look a little audacious from the horizon. So one other question, this has to do about education. Obviously, education is huge for our workforce, ultimately for our businesses. Speaking with Mike Morath, when we went and visited in Austin several weeks ago. He mentioned that we're still 60% roomies and 40% Zoomies, which means that 40% of our education in Texas is still staying at home, and only 30% of them are doing better, which means 70% are not. As you look at this through a national lens, we're going to hit a COVID educational slump. Ultimately, that's going to impact our business's ability to hire qualified candidates. What are we doing on the national lens to help get folks back in school and make sure that their education is where it needs to be?
Well, of course, that's being discouraged by the current administration. But so what many of us believe will be the most helpful thing is to back the federal government out of it and let states and local government make those decisions as to when to fully reopen. There are threats that the Biden administration would like to mandate that schools not reopen in person. And we've already got schools that have made great progress, as you know, and have done that. And so right now, the biggest thing is trying to keep the federal government from interfering in state and local decisions. And as you know, the 10th Amendment points out that any power not specifically enumerated is reserved to the states and the people. And one of those things is education. It's not specifically mentioned. And yet this administration, as some Republican administrations, they want to dangle more of states' own money out there and say, if you want your own money back, then you got to do what we tell you about education. And so right now it's an effort to prevent those things from being in bills. And Mark, to add to what you were saying earlier about when I hear about bills that may affect you, letting you know, it also is extremely helpful. Sometimes it's just gossip that business people hear, but sometimes it has a basis in fact. So if anybody on this call hears about a bill that this administration or the House or the Senate majorities are trying to push through that will just really devastate your business, let me know. Because let me tell you, it's a lot easier to go, whether it's a Republican majority or Democratic majority, to go to people. And this is something I've actually been successful and been told, don't tell people that came from you, but saying, look, let's tweak this language, then you can make the bill bipartisan. You'll get a bunch of us to vote for it, but we need to tweak this to protect these jobs, protect businesses so that those jobs don't go away. It's easier to get that done early on. It's amazing. Again, Republican or Democrat, once a bill passes a committee, it is really hard to get the author to change or the committee chair to change it. And I've been told a number of times since I've been there, that's a really good idea, but we're just going to leave it like it is because it'll be too much trouble to try to change it. And so it's really good to get it early on. And so any information you have, please pass that on and let us get to the bottom of it. It may be something we can fix before it does damage to your business.
That's a great thing to send out to our customers simply and our members. Our job as chambers, we've said already in this call, is to bring value to our members. There's not much greater membership value than advocacy, in my opinion. And this is one of the things that our chambers do the best. We're down in Austin several weeks ago. East Texas Coalition took a trip, and to sit in the offices, and just one thing to remind everybody on this call probably knows, but the availability of our elected officials is immense. And sometimes we don't take advantage of it. But specifically when you have something that is going to do damage to your business, please reach out to Congressman Gohmert's office. Please, because those specific situations where you have actual dollar numbers, I have 10 employees that I'm going to have to release. I have this product that I cannot ship out. I can't create this because I don't have the workers. those then turn into successful legislation. And so I can't say thank you enough. We're at the end of our time today. Congressman Gohmert, thank you for joining us from
Thank
South
you.
Texas. And thank you for
I'll be
bringing
back
some-
home this afternoon, though. I just came down for one day and to lead my part of this this effort by the House members, and I'll be back this afternoon.
Well,
Thank
thank you. Thank you for advocating for the businesses of East Texas. If there's anything we can do to help you do that, please let us know. Thank you for joining the call
Thank you.
today. Thank you. And to the rest of the folks on the call, thank you so much for joining today. The East Texas Coalition, if you have not been able to join us either on one of our trips or on our Capitol Connect or luncheon, our job is to advocate for you. So if you're having an issue and you're a member of the Lindale, the Tyler, the Kilgore area, or the Longview Chamber of Commerce, please join their group, join one of the governmental affairs committees, jump in and do your part to make sure that both local and state and federal policy looks advantageous to our business community. Thank you all for joining. If you would like a copy or a recording of the meeting today, please get with Jill. Other than that, I will say God bless you, God bless Texas, and we'll see you soon. Thank you for joining.